Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at a few signings that happened from our past couple of days, some more interesting free agency updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Blue Jackets, the Penguins, the Flames, and a handful of other teams. We'll get to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before I get this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Let's try and hit that before Friday's live stream. And remember, don't forget to stay tuned for Friday's live stream at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, Saturday's live stream at 10 a.m. Mountain Time talking about the draft, and the live stream on July 1st at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time talking about free agency and things like that. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. But in today's video, we've got a couple very interesting things. We're going to start off with 3 signing updates that we saw from our past couple of days. There's some very interesting signings from our past few days, so we'll touch on those things first. The Calgary Flames have signed Justin Kirkland, who was a decent bottom 6 guy, call-up option type guy in the Calgary organization last year. Center/left winger, 28 years old, was a pending UFA, gets a 1-year contract extension with a $900,000 AAV, so very interesting note there. Kirkland this past year had 2 goals, including his first at the NHL level, and 8 points in 21 games. So I think he could be a call-up option and maybe could be a very decent bottom 6 forward for the Calgary Flames at $900,000. It's not an overly bad deal there for the Flames. So very interesting note there, but Kirkland signed an extension in Calgary. Then we saw the New York Rangers sign an extension as center/winger Adam Edstrom, who's 24 years old. He was a pending RFA. Really solid guy. He's 6'7", solid bottom 6 forward. Had a decent season last year. Got a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $975,000. So I expect Edstrom to be a consistent 4th line forward next year. Maybe he could be a healthy scratch. Could even be a call-up option, but I would expect him to play quite a bit of time in the bottom 6 with the Rangers next year. He had 5 goals and 9 points in 51 NHL games last year for the Rangers. Also got some time at the AHL level. So very interesting note there, but Edstrom, who actually showed pretty good promise last year as a bottom 6 forward, gets a 2-year extension with the New York Rangers. And then we saw the Dallas Stars, so one of their depth players, and that was Cole Lind. Lind, who's a winger, 26 years old. He was a pending UFA, gets a 1-year contract extension with the AAV of league minimum. Lind's been bouncing around over the past couple of years. He was in Vancouver first, then he went to Seattle. He spent this past year with Dallas. Didn't play at the NHL level, but had 22 goals and 49 points in 68 AHL games, so was a very solid AHL player. So I could see Lind be similar thing next year, like an AHL player could potentially be a call-up option. So very interesting note there, but Lind, who was a pending UFA, has been extended by the Dallas Stars. So very interesting note there. But the Stars have extended Lind, the Rangers have extended Edstrom, and the Flames have extended Kirkland. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a few news updates. So we're going over to a few news updates. We only have a couple of things here to talk about. First, with the players signing overseas. Toronto Maple Leafs RFA Topai Niemela, who was one of their top defensive prospects. Been playing over, I think, as he's in the AHL or overseas over the past little while, was an RFA, needed a new contract. Well, actually, he has signed a deal over in the SHL, so he's going to remain overseas for the next year, which is very interesting note there. So the Leafs will once again be able to retain his signing rights, but Niemela is going overseas. So it's a very, very interesting signing, as Niemela is a very, very fantastic defensive prospect, and I think eventually could be a third pair defenseman, but it's not going to be this year. She signs overseas, so very interesting note there. When it comes to a couple of interesting free agent updates, when it comes to Toronto, they apparently have some major interest in Granlund and Suter. Both are really good middle 6 guys. Granlund's a little bit older than Suter is. Suter's coming off a very good season. Granlund had a fantastic year with both San Jose and Dallas. Both are good middle 6 guys. Both can play center, but they can also play wing. Very versatile guys. Probably going to cost between $4 or $5 million on the AAV and free agency. So I could maybe see the Maple Leafs send one of them if they do wind up losing a guy like John Tavares. If they need some sort of a second or third line center, I could see Granlund and Suter be high on the list for the Leafs. So that doesn't come as too much surprise to me, at least, that the Leafs have some interest in these players. While I do think that Granlund and Suter are really solid players and they could get really high AAVs, even though all of those things, I do think that it could be really good fits in Toronto. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Going on to St. Louis Blues, there's a recent report out there saying that they are not going to bring back Ryan Suter, which I don't think is too much of a surprise. Suter was a decent third pair, 6/7 defenseman this past year in St. Louis, signed a 1-year deal there. He's over 40 years old. The Blues have a plethora of really solid defensive players on that team, so there makes no sense to bring back Suter. So if he doesn't retire, we'll see if Suter winds up signing a new deal, probably like a 1-year contract elsewhere, but Suter is scheduled to hit free agency on July 1st, if you're interested out there. According to Bruce Garriott, he says that the Ottawa Senators are expected to have some major interest in Brock Boeser in free agency. Now, this comes as no surprise to me. Boeser was a guy who was linked to Ottawa a little while ago, so I think for the right deal, Ottawa might try and sign Boeser, but if it's going to cost him like $8 to $9 million plus to sign him, I don't think it's going to be a really solid deal there for the Ottawa Senators. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but I expect Ottawa to have some interest in Brock Boeser in free agency, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But those are all the updates from the past couple of days. As Niemela signs over in the SHL, and I'll have to postpone signing with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs have interest in Granlund and Suter heading to free agency. The Sens have interest in Boeser heading to free agency, and Ryan Suter will not be brought back by St. Louis, so I'm interested to note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, got a couple of things here to talk about. First, when it comes to Frank Seravalli, he was mentioning about the Columbus Blue Jackets that he keeps on hearing Damon Severson's name come up in trade rumors. And that's very interesting to note there. The Jackets are a team that Elliot Friedman keeps on hinting at is going to make a major move. They have 2 first-round picks, the 14th and 20th overall pick in this year's draft. Very likely chance to move one of them. This team's like 1 to 2 maybe big moves away from being a playoff and maybe even a solid contender in the Eastern Conference. And the Jackets have a really solid young team. So Severson's name coming up in trade discussions is very interesting. There's a very likely chance the Jackets could lose Fabro and Provorov to free agency in less than a week. So with that in mind, you'd be kind of wondering why they try and move Severson if they can't come to terms with Fabro and Provorov. Maybe they think that they can come to terms with those guys and need another spot on their roster so they can move Severson. Severson had, I think, 6 years left on his contract at a $6.25 million cap hit. He had a decent season last year. He's not going to put you up a whole bunch of points offensively, but he is a pretty decent point producer on the blue line and does have a solid aspect of defensive mindedness to his game. So very interesting note there. I could see a couple of teams, even though he has a longer term deal, have some major interest in Severson should he be available. And I think if a guy like Aaron Ekblad resigns in Florida, Severson will become that much more of a hot commodity on the trade market. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Personally, I don't see Severson getting moved because I think the Jackets will keep him, especially if they lose Provorov or Fabro. But I think if they do wind up keeping at least one of Provorov or Fabro, and Severson could be moved to maybe get a bigger change or maybe get some sort of a bigger upgrade, whether it be up front in net or on the blue line, I could see that happen. So I don't think it's an overly likely option that Severson gets moved. I wouldn't be overly surprised if it happens, so I'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to David Pagnotta, he was mentioning that the Carolina Hurricanes and Columbus Blue Jackets both have called on Rasmus Andersson and Calgary. Now, like we talked about in our last video, Pagnotta mentioned Ottawa. He wonders how much interest they'll have in Andersson, but we have heard in the past that Andersson has a 16 no-trade list and that Ottawa is on that no-trade list, so it sounds like he'd have to waive to go to Ottawa. But Carolina, Columbus, those are very interesting scenarios. If the Jackets do wind up moving on from Severson, adding Andersson will be very good. And the thing with the Jackets is they will be able to pay Andersson whatever the heck he wants before free agency next year because they have the cap space to do so. When it comes to Carolina, they have some very interesting pieces on their blue line. They have Walker, Gostisbehere, Slavin, Chatfield. They have some decent ones. But Orlov's about to hit free agency. They're not bringing him back. Burns is up there in age. He might be brought back on like a short-term deal, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't brought back. So with those two guys heading to free agency, I wouldn't be surprised if the Hurricanes have some interest in Andersson. The Canes don't have an overabundance of draft capital or top prospects, but they could put together a package that I think would intrigue the Calgary Flames. So I have to wait and see on that. No guarantees by any means that Andersson does get moved, but Pagnotta does say that 2 Eastern Conference teams in the Jackets and the Hurricanes have called on him, and we'll have to wait and see if he does wind up getting moved. Staying with David Pagnotta, he mentions that the Buffalo Sabres won't move Alex Tuch unless they're overpaid, and that contract negotiations will happen later on into the offseason. So that comes as no surprise to me. Tuch has been a really solid player over in Buffalo over the past number of seasons since he was acquired in the Jack Eichel trade. He's been a really good fit there, putting up a whole bunch of points. He's a hometown person, so keeping him I think will be a top priority for Buffalo Sabres to try and keep some of that culture in the Buffalo Sabres organization. So like I said, I don't see Tuch getting moved unless it's a drastic overpayment, which is what Pagnotta is saying here. And if they can come to terms on a contract extension, like, why move him? So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but do not expect Alex Tuch to get moved. And I agree with that too. I think Tuch's going to stay in Buffalo. So unless there's a team who horribly overpays for Tuch, do not expect him to get moved. According to Elliot Friedman, he says lots of people think Vegas may be the team to beat for Mitch Marner. So to me, that doesn't come as much of a surprise. When Vegas gets their sights on a big target, whether it be in free agency or in the trade market, they go after it. Just look at Stone, look at Eichel, look at Pietrangelo, look at some of the other big guys that they signed over their entire franchise's history. When they zero in on a player, they usually get him, and they're usually able to keep him around for a long period of time. Just look at Noah Hannafin. I mean, he was brought in as a rental and is now signed for the next, 6-7 seasons. So I could definitely see the Knights to go after Marner. They are in a no-tax state, so while I think it would cost teams $13-14 million to sign him, I think the Knights could maybe make it work where it's similar to a Rantanen contract, where it's maybe like a shorter term deal if that's what Marner wants to sign. So maybe like a 2 to 4 year deal with like a $12 to $12.5 million AAV. Like, I think that's something that Vegas could try and offer because they're in a no tax state. They can give Marner less money. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I agree with this. I think Vegas and Los Angeles are probably the two most likely spots, at least in my opinion, for Marner. And with the no tax state, with the winning group that the Vegas Golden Knights have, with the leadership they have, I just think Marner would be a great fit in the Knights organization. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Marner heading to Vegas. Going over to Frank Seravalli, he mentions that the Vancouver Canucks have indeed offered the 15th overall pick plus something else for Marco Rossi, and the Minnesota Wild declined it. And it's going to take more to acquire Marco Rossi. Now, that's insane. I've heard this be mentioned on Twitter a little bit over the past couple of weeks, that the Canucks did make an interesting offer for Marco Rossi of a 15th overall pick in this year's draft, plus either a prospect or a player, not sure who that was. But there was a lot of speculation that the Canucks had offered 15th overall plus something else for Marco Rossi, and that did not do it for the Minnesota Wild, and they want more. So that's surprising to me that they would want more than that for Rossi. Like, they could easily flip the 15th overall pick for another center upgrade, which is what it sounds like the Minnesota Wild want to do. But it'll be very interesting to note there. So the Canucks, I definitely think, really do like Rossi, and I think they would like to have him as like their second line center behind Pettersson. But if it starts to get up to above 15th overall plus a player or a prospect, I'm not sure if that's the right move there for the Canucks. And I'd be quite surprised if that would be the right move for a lot of other NHL teams. So we're going to have to see on that, but it seems like the price tag is extremely high on Marco Rossi. And according to Frank Seravalli, the 15th overall pick plus something else that was offered by Vancouver is not enough to pry Rossi out of Minnesota. And we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for a trade. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Nashville Predators, Elliot Friedman was talking about Jonathan Marchessault, and he says that if Marchessault has indeed asked to be traded out of Nashville, or would be open to being traded out of Nashville, he says that it'd have to be going to a similar place like Nashville, where it's a no-tax state where he can get more money. So, in my opinion, that makes sense. Like, he played in Florida. The first part of his career was selected by Vegas in the expansion draft. Played with Vegas all up until last year when he went to Nashville. Florida, Vegas, Nashville, one thing they all have in common is that they are all no-tax states. So that makes a whole bunch of sense as to why he would want to stay in a no-tax state. So could he be traded to Dallas? We know Dallas is trying to free up some cap space, so I'm not sure if Dallas would be a very smart move. Could it be a reunion in Vegas? Like, if the Marner deal works out, they free up some cap space some way. Maybe they could try and bring back Marchessault as well, but I think that's a little bit less likely. Florida's got their own problems trying to re-sign players, but you've also got a guy like Carolina. I think the Canes would have some interest in Marchessault. Seattle, they just created a whole bunch of cap space. Imagine Seattle getting Marchessault. That could be a very interesting one. And I think there's a couple of other no-tax state teams, like Tampa. Could Tampa try and get it if they can make the cap work? So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But Friedman does say if Marchessault is to get moved and wants a fresh start, expect him to be dealt to a no-tax state, probably somewhere like Carolina, Tampa, or Seattle. So I have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the fourthperiod.com, they were mentioning Erik Karlsson, and they said that Karlsson is open to waiving his no movement clause to go to a contender. So that's very interesting out there after, what was it, 1 to 2 years now in Pittsburgh. Karlsson's done pretty well, but he hasn't been the 100-point player he was in San Jose that year that he got traded to Pittsburgh. And now it seems like with the Pittsburgh Penguins trying to get bad, trying to sell off a whole bunch of pieces, Karlsson seems like a prime trade chip for them. And And according to fourthperiod.com, they also say the Penguins could retain some money on Erik Karlsson. So my guess is this could be a very similar situation to the Seth Jones situation at the trade deadline. The Hawks, even though it was for a longer period of time, retained, I think it was $2.5 million on Jones' contract, made him a $7 million player, and got a first-round pick and franchise goaltender in return for him. That was a smart move there for the Blackhawks. Even though they're going to have his retention on the books for a couple of years, it made sense. If the Penguins do something similar to this, where they maybe retain $2.5 million, make him like a $7.5 to $8 million defenseman, I think there would be a ton of interested parties to try and add a top four right shot offensive defenseman who are only making $7.5 to $8 million. And I think the Penguins could get a massive return for him, probably even a bigger return than they gave up to get him. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Like, could Karlsson get moved? I think it's a very likely possibility. I think Karlsson getting moved is very likely to happen, especially if the Penguins retain some money. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. No guarantees that Karlsson does get moved because he has no movement clause, he has a high cap hit. There's a whole bunch of things that could go wrong with this deal, but I definitely think with the Penguins trying to retool, rebuild, moving Karlsson's probably a priority for them. If he's willing to waive his no movement clause, that would make sense. And I think any teams who need some top four right shot defensive help, a team that comes to mind would be Anaheim, would be Detroit, Calgary, if Karlsson will be willing to waive there, and then probably a couple of other teams would have some major interest in Karlsson. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But apparently, Karlsson's open to waiving his no movement clause. Penguins could retain, and if those two things do happen, I think there's a very likely chance that Karlsson gets moved. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all we're talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think will happen? Could Karlsson get moved by Pittsburgh? Could Marchessault get moved by Nashville? What will it take for a team to acquire Rossi? Do you think Vegas is a team to beat for Marner? Do you see Buffalo keeping Alex Tuck? Columbus or Carolina try and land Rasmus Andersson, and is Severson getting dealt by Columbus? Definitely very thoughts on all of that, plus all the updates we talked about from over the past few days down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this for all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for my Friday, Saturday, and July 1st live streams talking about the draft, free agency, and everything else in between. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, and for that, so check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.